They haven't had this in 7 years. That's why Toto's getting twitchy. That's why he's swearing at the camera.
I think we can all agree that 2020 was a crazy year to be an F1 fan. But something I think we can also agree on is that 2021 was better in every single way. Unless you're a Hamilton fan. 21 races, and the Belgian Grand Prix. 5 million views, 13 different podium sitters, 50,000 subscribers. The first non-Mercedes winner of the driver's title since 2014. Yeah, 2021 was awesome, but I think 2022 will be awesomer. But first, let's go over a list of the key moments of 2021 that helped make it so good, with help from a friend of mine, F1Union, over on his Instagram. 2021 started, as most years do, on the 1st of January. We were in the middle of the off-season after another year of Hambot Ver, and oh boy were we in need of something different. The only thing was, with so little changing year on year to 2021, it was hard to see a world where that domination would change. The livery reveals came and went, with the most notable changes between years being the Renault turning blue, the Racing Point turning green, and the Haas turning round and round in circles. In terms of new drivers, we had 4 rookies on the grid in Nikita Mazepin, Mick Schumacher, Yuki Tsunoda, and Fernando Alonso. In terms of how their seasons went, I think it's fair to say that the 2-time world champion had the best season, with Tsunoda and Schumacher tied behind him, and then Mazepin a distant last. Throughout this video you'll hear a little bit about their seasons, but I really don't think Mazepin and Schumacher trying to kill each other at the back of the grid is the most important thing to focus on. Anyway, the teams arrived at pre-season testing with a point to prove, and I arrived at my sofa with low expectations. So you can imagine it was a pleasant surprise to see my favourite driver and team doing so well. And without wanting to sound like I want to wish failure on anyone, it was nice to see the dominant outfit of Mercedes doing so not well. Of course, I was skeptical about this performance though, as Mercedes are known to borrow a little bit of sand from the beaches when they go testing, and it just didn't seem plausible that such a small regulation change would hit the title defenders so hard. As per 2020 standards, the season opener in Australia was cancelled, which I'm sure Perspective was overjoyed about. As a result, the season opener was going to be in Bahrain, and what a season opener it was. For the rookies, it was a mixed bag. On the one hand, Yuki Tsunoda had quite a good race, but on the other hand, Mick and Nikita filled the back 2 slots of the grid and then both spun on the first lap. Nikita's race lasted precisely 25.597 seconds, and he completed more formation laps than racing laps. Back at the front though, Max Verstappen was lining up on pole with Lewis Hamilton alongside. Valtteri Bottas had made it a Mercedes 2-3, and Sergio Perez had been knocked out in Q2 before his engine knocked itself out of the race on the formation lap. While the other cars had to do a second formation lap, Checo pulled a cheeky Control-Alt-Delete on the car and got it going again. Unfortunately, this meant he had to start from the pit lane, but hey, it was better than nothing. Mercedes pulled a strategic masterclass to have Lewis in front of Max at the end of the race, and while Max was on faster tyres, he couldn't get past Lewis by virtue of him having to hand the position back when he went off track. Despite the fact that Lewis had extended the track 29 times over the course of the race, which had easily gained him 6 seconds if we assume he gained just over 0.2 of a second every time. But no, I guess the rules are different when you have to get past someone. Anyway, with Lewis taking the win and fastest lap, we went into Imola with Lewis on 26 points and Max on 18. Hamilton took pole in Imola with Sergio Perez doing the impossible and actually out-qualifying Max Verstappen to take P2 alongside him. Then came Max, and occupying the final 3 grid slots were our rookies. On the race start, Max passed Checo with ease and then got the elbows out into turn 1 to take the lead. Halfway through the race, George Russell tried to get into the Mercedes car a year earlier than planned, which brought out the red flag. Conveniently, this red flag came just as Lewis Hamilton had stacked it into the wall, so he got away scot-free as opposed to losing positions from a front wing change. Naturally, this brought out the classic slander name Luck Milton, which would become a common occurrence over the year. Another thing of note from Imola was Lando Norris finishing 3rd. Which was nice. Portugal brought with it the 3rd pole sitter in 3 races, but Valtteri Bottas didn't race nearly as well as he qualified, meaning we got the good old-fashioned Ham-Ver bot top 3. Same result in Spain, but more notably than the race was the qualifying session, where Lewis Hamilton took his 100th pole position. Later in the season he'd match it with his 100th win, but we'll get to that in a bit. Monaco was a terrible race to be a Mercedes driver, with Bottas retiring after the longest pit stop of all time, and Hamilton finishing in 7th, very almost getting himself lapped as he did so. Verstappen won it, meaning he took the championship lead for the first time in his life, which was, again, quite nice. Something that I don't want to mention but sort of have to is that Charles Leclerc couldn't start the Grand Prix despite qualifying pole, as he destroyed his car the day before and the Ferrari mechanics didn't think to replace the drive shaft. As compensation, we got Sainz and Norris on the podium though, so it's not all bad. Baku was a terrible race to be in the championship fight, as Max Verstappen's tyre exploded on the main straight, taking him out of the race and bringing out a red flag. Lewis Hamilton then forgot to turn off the now infamous brake magic button on the restart, and therefore he locked up and went straight on at the first corner, gifting Sergio Perez the win after the 2-lap shootout at the end. This was probably the most unexpected podium of the year, with Vettel coming in second and Gasly rounding it off, all of which made the pain of being a fan of either Max or Lewis worthwhile in my humble opinion. France, Styria and Austria were a hat-trick of wins for Max Verstappen, wherein he took his championship lead to 32 points, which after the Silverstone sprint race became 33. Now, we all know what happened in Silverstone, with Lewis taking Max out of the race at Copse with a 55G collision before celebrating the race win like a world championship. But anyway, I'm trying to be unbiased here. In Hungary, it was the other Mercedes car's turn to take out Max Verstappen, but Valtteri didn't do as good a job as Lewis, so he only destroyed half of Max's car. Bonus points for the two McLarens and the engine of Sergio Perez though. That was quite the bowling display. As a result of the ensuing red flag and the rain, there was a huge mix-up of the order of the race, and when every driver except Hamilton chose to change to dry tyres after the formation lap, it made for a great photo opportunity and a terrible race for Lewis. As a result of the strategic disaster class, Esteban Ocon took the race win, followed by Sebastian Vettel and then Lewis Hamilton, although when Vettel's car was found not to have enough fuel in it at the end of the race, Hamilton was gifted second and Carlos Sainz brought onto the podium, which he's made something of a habit of recently. I think we'll just gloss over Belgium, as it wasn't a race. But again, it needs to mention that there have been people complaining about Max getting points from that race, despite the fact that he was the only person to out-qualify a Williams that day. So, oh, but before we move on to the Dutch Grand Prix, let's quickly mention one of F1Union's moments of the year. George Russell's stellar qualifying lap to put the Williams in second. Not the second part of qualifying, second on the grid. Wow. The Dutch Grand Prix was awesome. A really boring race to watch, but I've never seen so many orange flares in my life, despite the fact they were banned at the circuit. And I would have killed to be in that crowd. Max won the race with Lewis second, as had become tradition over this year. Italy then, the second time the protagonists clashed, and the first and only time Hamilton didn't finish a race this season.
They're racing for the biggest prize in the sport.
But two irrelevant drivers giving each other a bonk isn't important. What is important is our next F1Union standout moment. This, of course, was Ricciardo winning the race, which he hadn't achieved just by good fortune like Gasly had done the year before. He'd been in the right place before Hamilton and Verstappen's crash, so he could capitalise. And capitalise he did. Norris took pole for Russia too, with Carlos Sainz in second and George Russell somehow burgling his way into third. Lando was on course to win the race too, before... you know. So after all that chaos, it was still Hamilton and Verstappen taking first and second. To take second from last on the grid was for Verstappen one of the most overlooked drives of the season, and one that helped him win the championship, no doubt. Next came Turkey, where Valtteri Bottas set right the wrongs of Turkey 2020 and won the race, with Red Bull taking a double podium behind him. Hamilton came home in an uncharacteristic 4th place, and I realised we haven't checked in on the rookies in a while. So both Haas cars got lapped twice, Alonso performed some severe terrorism at the start, and Yuki Tsunoda finished 14th while his teammate was in 6th. Yeah, maybe not the best race to check in. Verstappen won in America with Hamilton as usual in 2nd place. Perez came home 3rd to make it a second double podium with the now charging Bulls. And then, guess what? The exact same top 3 came in Mexico, with Checo agonizingly close to making it a 1-2. Brazil was Hamilton's best weekend for sure. He started near the back in the sprint, at the back in the race, and still won by 10 seconds. If that's not a drive to remember, then I don't know what is. Had things gone differently in Abu Dhabi, this is what we'd be calling his championship-winning drive, because without it, Max would have had one hand on the trophy before we even reached the final round. Qatar was a relatively dull race by 2021 standards, with Hamilton winning and Max in second, but Alonso finished on the podium, which was cool. Saudi Arabia was easily the most chaotic race of the year, and that's saying something. 50% of the race's laps were under safety car, and worse than that was the fact we had 2 red flags. The FIA did a really questionable job at stewarding, but I think we need a whole separate video on that issue. That's not me saying I'm going to make it, by the way. I just can't be bothered to make a video on a now irrelevant topic. The two championship protagonists gave each other another bonk, and then Lewis sped off into the distance with half a front wing, setting the fastest lap as he did so. It should of course be mentioned that Max got more damage than Lewis did from the encounter, and that we just couldn't see it because it was the diffuser, but at the same time we need to remember it was Max's fault. Or at least that's what the FIA say, and I would never question their perfect stewarding, would I? But anyway, Lewis won and Max came second, and that meant that the two championship protagonists went into Abu Dhabi level on points. That's only happened once before, and that was was in 1974, and with more points awarded to more positions from more races, it happening again in 2021 was even more impressive. After Saudi, I'd pretty much given up all hope of the championship, but by some miracle, Max took pole by a very healthy margin. Suddenly, the spirits were up for the Orange Army, but they'd be dampened even before the first corner of the race, when Lewis Hamilton got yet another lightning start. Max made a bold move going into the chicane, but Lewis saw him, backed out, and proceeded to cut the whole chicane, gaining a second on Max. Max then began to catch back up to Lewis, and Mercedes used that as an excuse to the FIA that they had, and I quote, reinstated the gap between themselves and Verstappen. Lewis then picked up the pace and began to sail off into the distance, and was within 5 laps of winning the championship when—
oh no! Nicholas Latifi has crashed. That will be a safety car.
The controversy with this was that there were 5 lapped cars between Max and Lewis, after Max had just pitted, and the FIA thought it would be best to allow them to get ahead before resuming the race with 1 lap to go. According to the rules, they were supposed to let through either every lapped car or none at all, but that's not what happened, and so the race resumed for a 1 lap shootout, with Max on new softs and Lewis on old hards. With 1 lap to go, 3.5 miles lay between the 2 protagonists and the championship. Would it be an 8th for Hamilton or a 1st for Verstappen? We'd seen the 2 best drivers in the world go toe-to-toe for 22 races, and here we are, on the last lap of the last race, and still nobody had the title. The safety car ducked into the pits and Hamilton was free to go, Verstappen free to give chase. Max gained through turn 1, 2, 3, 4, and into turn 5 he lunged down the inside with Lewis offering no defense. Max now had the lead, but he had Lewis in the slipstream and the Red Bull had just to defend, because a championship depended on it. He made it to the end of the straight, leading by almost nothing at all, and then came another straight. Hamilton was this time alongside and almost ahead, but into the banked sweeping corner, Max was able to hold Lewis off. With Sector 3 offering no passing opportunities, Verstappen only had to keep it clean to win the title, and that he managed. He'd done it. To say I was over the moon would be an understatement. My favourite driver had just won the World Championship for the first time. Now, I'm not going to say he wasn't lucky to win the race, because he obviously was. But I'm also going to say that at least this balanced out some of the good fortune Lewis had experienced earlier in the season. Having the rules changed mid-race for him in Bahrain, the red flag come out in a nick of time in Imola, being allowed to change broken parts of his car under red flag in Silverstone, having all of his rivals taken out by his teammate in Hungary. Hamilton had been fortunate. Max had too, but overall we were breaking even. To say that either driver didn't deserve to win the championship at the end of the year would also be a lie though. These two raised their game immensely between seasons, and even when the rest of the field were upwards of 20 seconds behind them, Max and Lewis would still be toe-to-toe. They both overcame huge setbacks over the season, Lewis in Brazil, Max in Sochi, and at the end of the day, neither driver deserved to lose this championship. I've made it very clear in this video that I'm a Max fan, but you can't deny that Lewis has been outstanding this year too. It was always these two, first and second, with the rest of the field picking up the pieces. They came together multiple times. Both drivers broke records this season, one a 7-time champion and the other a first-time champion. Lewis showed maturity over the season, backing out where he sensed danger, living to fight another day, and fight he did. 8 wins, 17 podiums, 5 poles, and 6 fastest laps. Max showed this season what he can do with a top car, and ultimately he came out on top. Luck was on his side at the end of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, but there were a lot of times when it wasn't. At the safety car restart on lap 58 of 58, it was not a given that Max would pass Lewis. He had to make the move, and he did. Max Verstappen, whether people like it or not, is the world champion. Yeah, 2021 was awesome. And I would be saying that whoever won the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. But I think 2022 will be even better. You see, next year will be the first year of the new regulations, which will, if nothing else, create much better racing. Just because we saw Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton able to fight it out every lap, it doesn't mean the old regulations made it easy to race. The dirty air through Sector 3 in Abu Dhabi made it, as always, impossible to follow. And if everything goes as it should with these new regulations, then dirty air, while not gone completely, should be much lower than it is now. Given how much energy the top 2 teams have put into this year, I highly doubt we'll see both of them fighting for the title again next year, which opens the door for another team to come in and fight for the wins. Maybe McLaren will come and win their first championship since Lewis in 2008, or maybe it'll be Ferrari who end their win drought. But let's be real, we all know it's going to be Haas. New regulations also mean new, hopefully better looking cars, and therefore new liveries, which I can't wait to see the reveals of before pre-season testing. We also have lots of new driver lineups. Guan Yu Zhou is joining an actually half decent driver in Alfa Romeo, Alex Albon is returning to F1 with Williams, but most notably we have George Russell in the Mercedes, alongside Lewis Hamilton. Even if not for the championship, I expect this last pairing to race each other very hard, and I definitely expect some race wins for both. Now, we'll have to wait and see in a few months as to how things look in preseason testing, but I honestly believe that we'll see in 2022 a season even better than this. I hope that for all of you, 2022 will be better than 2021, whether that's in Formula 1 or just generally. But yeah, thank you for watching as always, Happy New Year, and I will see you all soon.